All right, welcome to another 902 gaming video, and today I'm going to be going over some of my set review for Phyrexia All Will Be One. And first up, we have blue, and in blue, I decided with these sets of review videos, I'm going to be posting one for each color separately, and then I'll probably post the whole thing all together. I wanted to go over cards that people aren't really talking about just yet, and just kind of focus on some stuff that people. There's always like certain cards that people are like, oh, this is Venerated Raw Priest. There's a bunch of cards that people are really focused on. I just wanted to go on over some other stuff that maybe people haven't mentioned as much, at least not yet, at least from what I've seen. And first up, like I said, we have blue. And we have Iker Moon Gauntlet. This has been talked about, I think, now that the free preview for certain content creators get to have and play certain cards on Arena. Iker Moon Gauntlet is a 3-mana artifact. Planeswalkers you control have 0 proliferate and -12 take an extra turn after this one. I think if it just had this ability on it, it would still be playable. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent and put an additional counter on that type of permanent, or on that kind of permanent. So basically, anytime you cast any spell that's not a creature, you get to basically +1 any of your planeswalkers. And then you also get to 0 and proliferate to put counters on all of your planeswalkers. So again, this will be a card. I think like many people have talked about this already. This will be a card that makes Super Friends a viable deck in the format to come. I think it's something that they've been missing. I think there's a bunch of good planeswalkers in the set as well. But Iker Moon Gauntlet, I think it does create a new archetype in the format going forward. And then next up, we have Unctus Grand Meditect. 3-mana, 2/4 creature. Other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card and then discard a card. So basically, it turns all of your blue creatures into looters. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. 1 Phyrexian blue mana, basically 2 life or 1 blue mana until end of turn. Target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other colors and types. Activate only as a sorcery. Now I bring this card up because the first 2 abilities are very, very strong, and the third ability is strong. But the fact that it says activate only as a sorcery, in other words, you can't respond to somebody casting Go for the Throat on your creature and turning it into an artifact. That being said, it can still do it. If your opponent is tapped out and you do it and you turn a bunch of creatures into artifacts, it nullifies all of your opponent's Go for the Throat. And the fact that it is whenever they become tapped. So if you already have a looter that taps to draw a card and discard a card, it basically will do it twice. You draw a card, discard a card, draw a card, discard a card. It doesn't actually have to tap itself to do that, or just whenever it attacks. And then other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. This will be the Lord for artifact creatures if that deck becomes a thing. I think there's potential for it to become a thing. That's why I mentioned this card. So I think this card will see play. Don't know where, but it definitely has potential. I think all of the lines of text on this card are very, very powerful. And just because of that, a 3-mana at 2/4, I think it could easily see play. And then we come to a few cards that I wanted to talk about and just give some speculation on the format going forward. First, we have Distorted Curiosity, which is 3-mana, sorcery, draw 2 cards, and it has Corrupted, and this spell costs 2 less to cast if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. So at 3-mana, draw 2 cards, you have Divination. And if your opponent has 3 or more poison counters, it is a 1-mana draw 2, which is absolutely crazy. Even at sorcery, it's absolutely crazy. It's a great card. Then we have Reject Imperfection, which is 3-mana, counter target spell. If its mana value was 3 or less, you proliferate. So a 3-mana counter target spell is our baseline now for a counter spell. And the fact that if its mana value was 3 or less, you get to proliferate. Again, it's a very, very good card. I'm gonna go over some more here and then just talk about all as a whole. Next up, we also have Serum Snare, 2-mana, instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. If that permanent had mana value 3 or less, much like the counterspell, you get to proliferate. We also have Thrumming Bird, 2 mana 1/1 flyer. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. So if you're seeing what I'm talking about here, we have poison counters, we have proliferate on cards, serum snare, and the counter spell. Basically, we already have cards that exist like that without the addition of proliferate. Then we have, if your opponent has 3 or more poison count, we have the corrupted mechanic, which reduces the cost of the card draw spell to 1 mana to draw 2 cards. You have Thrumming Bird that when it deals damage, you proliferate. We also have Experimental Augury, which is 2 mana instant. You look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one in your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library. Again, these are cards that we already have in the format, and they just tack on. This one also has proliferate at the end. So the reason I kind of try to group all of these together, also there is Prologue to Phyrexia, 2 mana instant. Each opponent gets a poison counter, and you'd get to draw a card. Now this is the only card out of this cycle that does not have a card to compare it to in current standard, or just in general, I suppose, because Divination's not in standard really. I don't think there's cards that are exactly the same that also have a benefit, but the Prologue to Phyrexia gives your opponent a poison counter and you draw a card. So with all of these other proliferate cards in blue, and blue is, I believe, the #1 color to have proliferate, you can just basically play a normal game of Magic, and as long as your opponent gets 1 poison counter, that every other time you proliferate, they will continue to get a poison counter. So you counter their spells, you bounce their spells, or you bounce their cards, or permanents rather. They keep getting a poison counter every single time you do that. So definitely, I think there's going to be some type of control deck maybe, or maybe some type of tempo deck that all it wants to do is get your opponent to get 1 poison counter, and then basically play a whole bunch of proliferate cards to basically get your opponent to 10 poison counter, kill them. All of these cards will add up to basically get your opponent to the 10 poison counters. Obviously, you can play something with Toxic as well. There's a bunch of other cards. I think blue-green potentially could have the best proliferate/toxic deck in the format, along with Ivy and Venerated Rot Priest. But the fact that so many cards in this set, especially in blue, have these just regular cards that are costed fine and they tack on proliferate onto it, just means that we're getting a lot of power creep here. But these cards all fit well together. And that's basically my the cards that I wanted to talk about in blue. I know there's stuff like Jace. I think Jace is better than people think he is. There's a bunch of different cards in blue. But yeah, those are the cards that I wanted to talk about in blue. And thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one, which should be black.